Welcome to the Wild West. Cryptocurrency and blockchain are new technologies that promise us a better way to do almost everything, from banks and art collecting to contracts and global shipping. But just like the Wild West, the world of crypto is full of get-rich-quick schemes and misinformation. So to help us sort fact from fiction, we invited Wharton business professor Kevin Werbach to answer all your questions. Enjoy. We're here with Kevin Werbach on such an interesting day. Kevin is one of the very few feet on the ground, clear-eyed thinkers, doers in crypto. And Kevin has a long history of being involved with very early trends, including at the national policy level. He's now a Wharton professor of business. And there's so much to talk to Kevin about, but we're going to focus on crypto today. Kevin, I want to start with my question, which is what's going on with crypto? And can you put this into a bit of a historical perspective for us, given that you've got that perspective?
And by what's going on in crypto, do you mean what's going on today, right now in crypto, or big picture?
Yeah, I mean, what's going on in crypto in general is it's being adopted by governments, et cetera, by larger institutions. You know, there's this larger scale thing. But then today there's a crash. And I know when we were going back and forth on Twitter, you said, yeah, there's always a crash. And so I just wanted you to pull back and give us that larger scale perspective on what's going on today in the markets.
In terms of the crypto markets, if you look at the chart of the Bitcoin price, Bitcoin launched at the beginning of 2009. We've had three waves. So there was a period from about 2010 to 2013, where 2013, there was this huge boom. There were micro booms before that, but 2013 is the one that first got people's attention. So Bitcoin spiked to over $1,000. Going in, it was somewhere closer to 100, spiked over 1,000, and then crashed almost all the way back down in 2013, although it wound up at a higher level than where it started. And 2013 to 2017 went up and down, was actually fairly stable during that period, but was mostly around $300-400. Then it went up to $900, and then 2017 it spiked from 900 to 20,000, and then crashed from 20,000 down to 3. But again, the 3 is still higher than the 900 and a whole lot higher than the previous numbers. And then went back up from 3,000 to 6, 7, 8, 9,000 for the last 3 years or so, until all of a sudden this year it spiked up to 60,000. As of this morning, back down in the 30s. So what's happening? Well, it depends. A lot of people who are crypto bulls see this as an inevitability. I mean, look what has happened. Yes, there have been a ton of these crashes, but every time we come out higher, and if you sold at 300 because you were taking profits because you bought in at 100, then you feel really foolish, even though we've had this terrible crash down to 30,000. And their argument is it's just a matter of time. Whatever it goes down to now, even if it goes down to 10,000 or 5,000 or whatever, the next bubble or the next boom is not going to be 60,000. It's going to be 200,000, and then it's going to be a million, and then it's going to, eventually it's going to be billions, because the view is this is a fixed supply asset. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. Similar kinds of issues with some of the other cryptocurrencies, although the stories are a little bit different, but Bitcoin is really kind of the driver of the market. The argument is just inevitably, because it's scarce and people are going to want it, that it's just a matter of time before it goes up more. I don't entirely buy that argument, but it's not entirely something we can dismiss out of hand. That's consistent with the facts that we have so far. There have been lots and lots of booms and lots of crashes. That's why this idea of HODL, which was a bastardization of hold, but people sometimes think it stands for hold on for dear life, is this meme in the Bitcoin community, because this is going back for 10 years. There were these days where the bottom fell out, and the argument was, no, keep the faith that inevitably Bitcoin is going to triumph. But that doesn't in any way prove that it's going to stop going down. There's a lot that's happening in the market today. It's concerning. There are issues about potential regulation. There are issues about manipulation in the market and so forth. So I don't know. I have a little bit of cryptocurrency. I don't hold a large amount, even though I'm a big believer in the underlying technology, because I don't think the market now is really a truly fair, unbiased market. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
It's a wild ride, not
Yeah.
for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
I know we have some beginner questions, some much more advanced questions. Blockchain architecture allows our game to reward creators by certifying authenticity. Market speculation around the future value of this UGC, user generated content art, doesn't have anything to do with our gameplay, but I'm concerned the current crypto climate could disrupt our efforts to establish a healthy and rewarding experience for creators and players when our assets are blockchain based.
So it's a very good question. And it's relating to this whole issue of non-fungible tokens, NFTs, which are one of the things that have gotten a lot of attention recently. Some of the things that seem to be different this time are NFTs have blown up in interest. There's also, been all of this Elon Musk tweeting about things and more sort of institutional adoption happening. But yeah, NFTs have caught a lot of people's attention. They're not new. The Ethereum standard, it was from 2017. So it's important to understand what exactly you get by the blockchain verifying the authenticity. Of course, you don't need a blockchain to do basically digital rights management, to have cryptographic proof of ownership or authenticity or something. We've had that for a long time. And of course, virtual goods and games have been a huge thing for a long time, having nothing to do with blockchain. What blockchain gives you is the ability to do that in a decentralized way, where you're not dependent upon whether it's the game developer or some central entity that's the one doing the certifying. And that matters for some things more than others. And I would agree with you. A lot of people have seen this happen, particularly what we've seen in, in the art market with some of these NFTs, and have said, oh, well, now we can actually reward creators because you can verify authenticity. And you could do that before. The better argument is, so maybe creators weren't able to monetize their work, not because they technically couldn't, but because the intermediaries, the agents, the labels, and so forth, because of the network effects and the concentration, they actually had all the power. And even though an individual artist could just say, here's my unique work, it wasn't going to scale up unless it was under the control of some centralized entity, and then they would screw the creators. Technically, it solves it, but not necessarily. And then finally, the asset itself is not necessarily on the blockchain. It's the record being verified as being unique. So a lot of these NFTs for artwork, the JPEG itself is just a graphic that's not secure in its own way, but verifying that the creator has granted a license to you uniquely, that's what the blockchain verifies. With virtual goods in games and using NFTs, I think you're right that because there has been this frenzy of activity, which is entirely speculative. Art markets are speculative. It's not that there's something illegitimate. People are not buying the Picasso because this Picasso is more useful or objectively better than another Picasso. That noise is not going to be in the market to that extent for very long. There's no rational reason why we've seen these crazy numbers for some of these NFTs, other than there are people who have a lot of crypto who basically are treating it like funny money and don't have much to do with it, and actually benefit from lots of articles about how much you can make on an NFT, or then actually the ones that are buying these things at these high valuations. And at some point, that's a Ponzi. It doesn't last. So I think that will calm down. The other piece is that in discussion of NFTs and kind of virtual assets in games, the argument has always been, well, what's different about doing it on a blockchain is the validation's on the blockchain. It's not the developer saying this is unique. And why is that useful? Arguably, one is trust, that you don't have to worry that the developer is going to say, oh, I can actually now make 10x of these and tank the value because I'm getting revenue, or nerf them somehow. And that you can potentially pass these things between sandboxes, between different games, buy the avatar, and then I want to buy the clothing somewhere else. I can do that in ways that are outside of the control of the game developer. My understanding is one big reason that that hasn't really happened is, of course, that the game developers say, what's in it for me? In the abstract, it might be nice to have a world where there's this completely separate virtual asset marketplace that's on blockchain. No individual developer is going to want to enable that and lose the revenue and the control they can get. I suspect that ecosystem is going to get built out, and eventually there will be ways that people will understand about what kind of assets are benefiting from this decentralized verification layer, and there'll be business models that sort of work for everyone. But I don't think we're there yet. These big NFT art sales have led to a lot of people thinking NFTs are just about art, even though the virtual goods story has always been there, and that's what CryptoKitties were, and it's much older and so forth. There's a lot of the audience out there that will say, oh, wow, you're doing NFTs for something other than art. So, and we'll still actually find that interesting, and will not necessarily have the same priors, which may to some extent help you.
That's a really tricky issue. Punchline from Kevin, we're all trying to figure this out together. It's
Yeah.
very dynamic. I think with games, one of the key challenges has to do with what has meaning outside of the magic circle. Every game, every experience that's meaningful to us has a kind of magic circle of people and an agreed upon set of rules and values, right? Like Kevin, you teach at Wharton, that's its own magic circle. Stuff has meaning inside of that, right? That wouldn't outside of it. So when you put something on blockchain, the implication is it has meaning outside of your magic circle in some way.
Yeah, but that's already true once you have something where you can pay dollars for something. I mean, that's already true once you have some sort of monetization of the virtual goods. And you're right, it becomes tricky in different ways, but it's already tricky. One of my former students actually went to Blizzard and did the real money auction house in, I think it was Diablo 2 or something, which was a total failure because they didn't anticipate what the behaviors were going to be. My sense is I think a lot of game developers have had this kind of, especially virtual economies where there's a significant, whether it's gold farming or some sort of real money economy around it. You don't want to completely stamp it out, but you also don't want to completely let it go crazy. And there's always that balancing act. If it gets to the point where enough people feel like the value in the magic circle is being downgraded because all everyone cares about is the value in dollar terms, then that kills the game.
Could you say a little more about what went wrong with the Blizzard real money auction house?
I think it was a combination of they didn't anticipate just the amount of the bots and the sophisticated actors who were figuring out how to arbitrage things there. They knew some of that was going to happen, but it was not sufficiently robust to it. I think it was mostly that. A lot of the players started feeling like, wait a minute, now I've got to go to work and spend all of my energy on playing the real money auction house, because the benefits you would get from that were so much greater than you get from playing the game. My recollection was it sort of went bad in a lot of ways.
There's this age-old truth in systems design, which is the more tangible and meaningful the rewards, the more people are going to game the system in ways that you couldn't imagine.
Yep.
And that sounds like it's a version of that story.
In social science, that's either called Campbell's law or Goodhart's law, which is, whenever you create something, some metric that people care about, that's essential to get something they want, they will reorient their behavior around that metric. That's teaching to the test and things like that, but it's also this phenomenon as well.
So one more quick question from our community. Kayla, who couldn't be here, asks, when you look at Bitcoin and ETH and Cardano, ADA, all these different blockchains, how do they differentiate?
So you can look at it at different levels. At some level, there's Bitcoin and everything else. In that Bitcoin was designed from the beginning to be maximally decentralized digital cash. It has very limited functionality because the more capability you put into the system, the more attack surface there is for security vulnerabilities. So Bitcoin was designed to be money. The hope of Satoshi Nakamoto was it would be used in payments and all kinds of other things. But just in terms of creating something that is money, that has value in and of itself, that's what Bitcoin is designed to do. And it does that pretty well. And that's one reason you see that it's always been the most valuable cryptocurrency in terms of trading activity. Why people trade is another story, but that's what it is about. Then everything else is really about functionality. The tokens have value and they're traded, but the purpose is not just to create value, it's to then create applications that get built on top of that value. And then there are some networks that are specialized. So, XRP, which is associated with Ripple, was designed for cross-border money transfers. It's controversial in a lot of ways, but it's easy to see at least the differentiation in what XRP is designed to be used for, as opposed to just being a pure monetary asset like Bitcoin. There are a few others that are more specialized, but really the subsequent generation, starting with Ethereum, are about smart contracts. They're about blockchain as a platform to power application functionality, to build computing on this decentralized foundation. And really, almost everything else since then has that element to it. Ethereum, because it was the earliest, it's by far that has the largest developer adoption of any of these things, the biggest community, worth the most, is sort of in a special category there in terms of how the market has always seen it. There's no guarantee this is all going to happen forever. We've only got 6 years of history, Ethereum, which is a lot in crypto time, but not a lot in real time. So it could change. But up till now, that's been sort of seen as different from the market. And then you have a long tail of a whole lot of other stuff. Every other network has some reason why it's better. Most of them have different technologies that allow them to scale much better in different ways and a different set of stories. Prices have gone up and down. The shiny new thing always gets a lot of attention. The most recent big one to launch was Definity, which has been under development for a long time. Launched and was immediately worth, like, I think $40 billion in market cap. It's got a different technical architecture that is more scalable than Ethereum, and this big story about what they call the internet computer, that their play is this is going to replace Amazon Web Services. It's a decentralized global computing platform. Each of these has an argument about what's different about it. There's way too many. The world, I think, will ultimately, the equilibrium point will be more than 2 blockchains, but less than we have now. There are network effects and economies of scale in developing to a more limited number. We're still in this period where, again, because the markets are so frothy and people get excited about a story or people get excited about something going up and they all pile in, other than Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's not a great clear connection between the developer activity and the real amount that's getting built on these things and actual transactional activity for something other than trading. Now, part of that is it's actually really hard to know how much any blockchain is actually used for anything other than trading, in part because there's also, as I alluded to before, there's lots of fraud in the market and wash trading and fake volume and so forth. I think ultimately that's going to be what's determinative. Are people using this for something, to do something other than get rich? There's, I would say, at least 10 blockchains that are out there where you could make a very serious argument, and probably more than that. This will be one of the survivors that long term it will have enough of a market, enough activity on the platform.
So Ian asks, what applications of this tech get you excited? Where do you see real opportunity? Could you add a little color to that, Ian, and introduce yourself as well?
I was thinking about was what you were speaking to earlier about it's very trendy and novel right now, and people are playing with it because of the novelty of it. Where do you think this really creates value for people, and where do you see that opportunity being?
Yeah. So all over the place. The reason I have, am now devoting most of my mind share for the last several years to this is I think this is, fundamentally a transformative technology that I don't think it will be quite as important of the internet, but it's a similar scale kind of technical transformation to the internet, which will unfold over a long period of time. That says nothing about what the price of Bitcoin should be at any moment in time. But on the cryptocurrencies we're talking about, the idea of a censorship resistant payment system is exciting if you are in a place that has weak rule of law. If you want to pay people in Venezuela, that's really exciting. And there's lots of human rights benefits for that and so forth. Now, whether we can get that benefit without enabling all kinds of money laundering and crime and speculation and other things, I don't know. So on balance, I'm not sure. But the benefit is a real benefit that is important. Broadly speaking, things that get me most excited, at least in the near term, are the things that are sort of less technically sexy, in that the systems that are truly decentralized, you have to make a trade-off for that. And so Bitcoin is a great example because it's so decentralized. It actually gets centralized in some other ways, but you can't do that much with it. And it can't evolve very much. You've got to get half of the miners to agree to upgrade to add anything to the protocol. So you can't really do smart contracts easily, and that loses a lot of power. So the stuff that excites me is the stuff that's much more real world and much more right now, which makes a big trade-off, which is a permission blockchain. So you don't decentralize to the same extent. You use the same cryptographic techniques, but have it be in a consortium where there's still a gate to get into the consortium. That gets you to things like supply chain, where there's just trillions of dollars and tremendous amounts of real world value, not just monetary value. You cannot today, without this technology, answer the question of, I am sending something from my factory in China to my store in Arizona. You simply cannot definitively answer the question, where is it right now in the world? Because there's no shared ledger, right? There's 50 companies in that chain around the world. They all want to keep their own data. They exchange it, but they don't trust each other. So blockchain is the solution to that problem. It is the only possible solution to that problem, talking about blockchain generally, because it has to be a decentralized solution. And that's not only a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity, but one that is huge in terms of the knock-on benefits in terms of liquidity of global trade. And that's just one example. There's some Penn students who won something called the Penn Engagement Prize, who are working in India to use blockchain to basically have unused pharmaceuticals be made available to hospitals that need them when there's sort of extras. And the drug companies want to make sure they don't go to the black market. And again, having a decentralized verification mechanism addresses that. It's a huge benefit. Lots of public sector uses. Digital identity actually is one. Decentralized self-sovereign identity is tremendously important for privacy, for efficiency, for all kinds of service provision. We need that to sort of go really into the 21st century in terms of government services.
Can you give us a specific use case of why we need that? Bring it alive.
Oh, sure. Take vaccine passports or COVID-19 tracking. We very well may be in a world for the rest of our lifetimes where virus is a risk, and any travel that you do, it will be important to be able to confirm your vaccination status. That's just one little piece of it. So, all right, who gets to control that? If you're in China or India or countries like that, they say, well, that's easy. The government controls that. I'm not entirely satisfied with that answer for lots of reasons. And so if we're going to say the answer is not everything gets centralized in the government, then we need a decentralized solution. And again, this is the way you get there. And then the other benefit that you get is, like I was talking about before with the virtual goods, then you can build other sorts of things on top of it. You can build systems where if I just need to know one piece of information, I need to know you've gotten this certification somewhere, I can get that as a cryptographically secure attestation without having to give up all of my data. So then that also becomes the response to the big tech problem in terms of all the control of data. Once we have this primitive, just like once we had a social security number, there are all kinds of things that can be done with it, even though 99% of them have nothing to do with paying you your social security benefits. Once we have an email account and you have an address on the global internet, then all this stuff builds on top of it. Once we have that identity primitive, then it opens up this tremendous amount of opportunity.
Love it. That was such a nice set of analogies. Thank you all for your amazing questions and
No,
for
my pleasure.
going deep.
You're also learning from one of the best with Amy Jo, so I'm sure you're getting a lot out of this, and glad to be a small part of it.
Want to level up your product skills and get expert coaching from industry leaders like Kevin? In our game thinking programs, we help innovative product leaders accelerate product market fit and build lasting retention from the ground up. Learn more and apply now at gamethinking.io/programs.